Hello everyone. Right, hope you all had a nice break. Let's just jump straight into some maths then, shall we? So here's your title, Introduction to Negative Numbers. I'm sure we're all pretty familiar with negative numbers and how they work, but this is just going to be sort of an introduction lesson to some of the stuff that we're going to be doing, how you're going to use it in the real world and things like that. Just going to get a bit better at it. Here's your learning objective, be able to order, add and subtract negative numbers, and your date is the 7th of January. Right, let's jump straight into it. Let's draw ourselves a number line. So if you all want to do this as well, it just might be useful just to have things written down and you can look back at it and it can make sense a little bit. But if you're really confident with the stuff, then don't worry. So we've got 0 in the middle. Let's say we've got 1 over here. Something that's less than 0 is always going to be negative. So if that's 1, then this is going to be negative 1. Lots of people say minus, and I know that I'm guilty of doing this sometimes as well. You say minus 1, but that's not really the same. You want to try and say negative 1, because that's sort of the official term for it, and when you're describing it and things like that. Whereas if you say minus 1, it kind of sounds like you just want to subtract 1 or something like that. So you want to normally say negative 1. So what would these numbers here be? What's halfway between 0 and 1? 0.5. What's halfway between 0 and negative 1? Minus, I said it, negative 0.5. Makes sense so far? Anything that's less than 0 is going to be a negative number. Fairly straightforward. Let's see how this can be used in the real world. So there's going to be a few questions on the worksheet that I've set for you. But let's have a go at drawing a thermometer. It's got a big round bit at the bottom and then it comes up round like that. I think I did a pretty good job. Right. Let's do this. So a thermometer looks kind of like this, where we've got something like 0 here, and it will go up 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll go up to plus 4, 3, 2, 1, minus 1, minus negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. For water, when it gets to 0, that is freezing temperature. I'm sure maybe you've done this in science or something like that, but when water gets to the temperature of 0 degrees Celsius, that's when it freezes. Anything below that, whenever it gets below that, it's going to stay ice, right? And when it goes above it, typically it's normally melting, yeah? So, one way you can use negative numbers in the real world is when you're measuring temperature. And in the UK we use degrees Celsius. I think everywhere in the world we use degrees Celsius, whereas in the United States I think they use degrees Fahrenheit, but we'll talk about that maybe another time if you want to know. Another way that they use negative numbers in real life is if you want to measure elevation, or something like height above sea level or something like that. So let's say that I've got a mountain. This is a mountain, and there's a little aeroplane flying round the mountain. That's an aeroplane. And there's a valley that goes down here, and there's a mountain, and then some sort of beach, I guess. And water is here. That means the water will be about here, over on the other side as well. So, at this point, right here, the elevation will be 0 meters. The elevation, or the height above sea level. Because that is sea level, right? So the height above sea level, it's not above it, it's not below it, it's just 0 meters, typically. That's how you would measure that in. This point here, I don't know, this will be about, I don't know, let's say it's 100 meters. 100 meters above sea level. What about this point down here? This point will be, let's say, if that's 100 meters, then this will be about negative 200 meters. So that is below sea level, and it's 200 meters below sea level, so we can say that it's negative 200 meters below sea level. Yeah? This point up here, super high, something like 250 meters above sea level. Make sense? That's how you'd use negative numbers in the real world, in real life. I just wanted to show you that because I'm sure we're all fairly familiar with negative numbers. Anyway, so some of these questions are going to ask you to order negative numbers. We know that a number like negative 2 is actually smaller than a number like negative 1, right? Because on the scale here, if that's 0, that's negative 2, that's negative 1. Negative 2 is further down, it's further away from 0 than negative 1 is. So you say that it's smaller, yeah? So if a question is asking you to order numbers like -2, -5, -1, minus, I'm saying they're all minuses, but they're supposed to be negatives. -6, -7. What's the smallest number here? It would be -7, then it would be -6, then it would be -5, -2, then -1. Fairly straightforward stuff. Makes sense. Right. The last thing that I wanted to go over before you guys do some of these questions is what happens when we want to add or subtract negative numbers. And this will make sense when I explain it, hopefully. Anyway, let's say I've got the number 2 and I want to take away, I'm going to subtract 3 from it. What does that leave us with? It's going to be -1, right? Because 2 on the number line would be up here, 0. Then it would be like that. We take away 1 from 2, goes to 1. We take away 2 from 2, it goes to 0. We take away 3 from 2, goes to -1. Makes sense? Cool. Next bit. Let's say we've got -1 minus 3. That would get us -4, right? Because if we've got on the number line -1 here, when we take away numbers, we want to go that way. Got -1, -2, -3, -4. We take away 1 from -1, we get -2. We take away 1 or 2 from -1, we get -3. We take away 3 from -1, we get -4. Yep. That's how you want to think about these things in terms of a number line. When you're subtracting numbers, you go that way on the number line. But when you're adding numbers, we've got -1, we want to add 3. That would get us 2, right? Because on the number line, we've got -1, 0, 1, 2. We add 1 to negative 1, we get 0. We add 1 again to 0, or we add 1 to 0, we get 1. We add 2 to negative 1, we get 1. Then we add 3 to negative 1, and we get 2. Simple as that. Let me just check if there's anything else I wanted to talk about. Right, one last thing. When we're subtracting a negative number, let's say we've got 1 minus negative 3. That's basically kind of like the opposite. So the negatives cancel each other out here. So negative and a negative turns into a plus. So you're basically subtracting negative 3, you're minusing minus 3. So if you minus minus 3, you're technically adding 3. So you'll get 4. 1 plus 3 equals 4. You subtract a negative and you add it. Yeah, I think this is only going to come with practice, so I will let you get on with the worksheet. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. All the answers should be there as well, so try not to cheat, but you can mark your own work. Just making sure you get it right. See you later.